and get us started.
Oh, thank you so much. I just want to, say that I know how the pandemic has impacted all of our lives. And I'm very, in lack of better words, appreciative to spend this time with you to talk about an important issue to me. Just to give you just a little bit of a background why I decided to enter into the literacy space, and very specifically why I'm in the space of education in general. It takes me back to my time as a young man in Philadelphia. I was, I'm trying to just pick the starting point, but I was left down in 7th and 9th grade. I hated school, hated reading. I was what they would define as a struggling reader. When I finally graduated from high school, I graduated with probably a D minus. Many of my teachers told me the only reason they graduated me was because they didn't want to see me next year. So I literally graduated high school when I was 19 years old. And there was a pivotal turning point in my life. One of my best friends had died my senior year in high school. And as time progressed, I went to college and studied some of the greatest African and African-American leaders. And I asked myself, how was I going to make a difference in this world? Very specifically, I thought about my 10 friends, and only 2 of us graduated from college, and only 3 of us graduated from high school. So I said to myself that my education is meaningless unless it's connected to developing our community. But more specifically, it's meaningless unless I can use my education to create more educational opportunities for kids who are like myself. That's what got me to Pittsburgh in 2006 when I started my master's work, and eventually in 2011, I graduated with my Ph.D. And again, my biggest thing was, how do we create institutions? How do we create institutions that will serve the needs of the Black community? And it was in my experiences in South Africa, working with local township entrepreneurs who literally had nothing but an idea. And one of the things that I found was that when you dig deeper into this idea, they would essentially say, this idea is, guess what? It's my dream. So they will hold this idea close to them as if it were their baby. And although we spoke different languages, one of the things that I found was that we were all able to connect with each other by using the language of dreams. So when I was sitting talking to them for hours on end, interviewing them and trying to figure out how to develop a learning experience that would meet them at their dreams, it really had a lasting impact on me. This will be a whole talking of itself. But I was, as an academic, I was watching Black South Africans not get the educational opportunities that they needed. And as a faculty member, I would always think to myself, hey, here goes students who want to come in, who have dreams, but the university is locked. The university won't admit them. And so this started to get me to think like, hey, how can I read about social justice? How can I talk about social justice in my classes? How can I, assign readings? While at the same time, there's social inequities in society that I'm not addressing. So I decided to participate in some protest called Fees Must Fall, which was basically Black South Africans saying that we need to create an educational system that is fair and equitable, but more importantly, free to people so that they can pursue their God-given, so they can develop their God-given talents in educational institutions. So that brings me back So eventually, when you do that type of work, there's consequences to it. So my contract wasn't renewed. I had to go back to the drawing board. So when I came back from South Africa to the United States, my oldest son was diagnosed with a speech delay. And it really forced me to be reflective. And in that reflection, I said, look, how am I going to help my son? Because I was talking to the educational system. These were the early intervention specialists. And they weren't giving me the solutions that I needed to meet my son at his need. So I said, you know what? I'm going to put down everything, put down applying for jobs and building this business that I was building. I said, you know what? I'm going to focus on my son, who was 3 at the time. And my youngest son was about 1.5. And so, no, he was 2. Excuse me. Was he 2? He was 2. And in that process of focusing on my son, I started to research best practices on how do you meet kids who have speech delays? How do you meet them at their needs? And one of the things that I found was that you read to them, And so I told my wife, I said, I got it. Don't even worry about it. I'm not going to do anything for the entire summer. I'm just going to go to Carnegie Public Library over in East Liberty, and I'm going to we're going to read 10 books a day. And she said 10. I said 10 books a day. 10 books a day keeps ignorance away, as I told the kids. And so I would read to him every single day. And as time progressed, I would start to see his speech delay mitigate. Then I started to create PowerPoints with that were focused on phonics. And I would have my boys do these different routines every single morning. And we started to see him progress. And in the midst of that, my 2-year-old is just sitting on my lap or sitting in his high chair, watching us go through the lessons. He's not saying much. And everything is just getting into his head. And I didn't understand the impact of this until one day I'm on the bus. I promise you this. I'm on the bus. When you're on the bus, you don't want your kids to sit next to strangers, right? You want your kids to sit with you. But it was a packed bus. So I was like, I can't hold both of these kids. They felt like they were 50 pounds each. And so I sat one on this seat and sat the other on this seat. And I kind of stood in the middle of the bus, one hand like this, one hand like that, looking at one of them, looking at the other one. And my youngest son looks at this young lady who was in high school's book bag. And her strap had the letters P, I, and K. And he just kept on saying, P-I-N-K. You just hear the bus turn around. People on the bus just turn around and looking. Oh, that's so cute. And he says, pink. Daddy, her jacket says, or her book bag says, pink. And everybody in the bus starts to say, oh my gosh, how old is he? I'm like, oh, he's 2.5. Then, of course, at that point, anybody with kids, once the kid get the stage, right? They just start, oh, look at that. That says this. I'm like, hey, okay. And the whole bus looking back. And that moment made me realize something. If this baby was exposed to phonics and phonemic awareness and all of the elements of literacy, comprehension, I could go on and on and on, then maybe other kids, if they're exposed to these same concepts, they could benefit from it too. And so, if I could just take a step back to when I was a kid, my mom used to take me to Temple University every Kwanzaa to hear a speaker by the name of Maulana Karenga. He's the guy who created Kwanzaa. And he had he had a phrase that he would always say every single time he would do a speech. And the phrase was, we have to be fathers to the fatherless and mothers to the motherless. So when I look at the city of Pittsburgh, specifically Pittsburgh Public's data on literacy rates, I said to myself, we have a big problem. 64% of African American children are not reading on grade level between 3rd and 5th grades. Now, I'm watching my son, who was 2.5 years old at the time. He's able to read. I'm watching my eldest son, who they told me that, don't worry, your son is going to be able to receive these services through our department until he's 21 years old. Now, that was a problem for my wife and I. Not saying that we want our son to be just like that. We snap a finger and he's all right. And his speech delay is gone. But what we did say is, guess what? You all don't have the record of doing right by black kids. And so so I said to myself, if there's 64% of black kids in Pittsburgh public who can't read, and my son who's 2.5, who we work with day in and day out, reading to him, doing phonics cards, everything. What would happen if I walked out into the community and did this type of work? What would happen if I, in lack of better words, was the father to the fatherless? If I saw it upon myself, not to see myself as a community member outside of the black community or outside of, how can I put this? What if I saw myself as a family member to all of these children? What if I saw myself as a father to all these children who could work with these kids to teach them how to read? It was something I had to deeply reflect upon, But it was easy because I remember there were folks in my own life who was a mother to me when my mama worked too much, or was a father to me because my father wasn't around. And so I took it upon myself to go out into the community and do this work. So I spent the whole summer developing a reading tour where I worked in communities and was teaching kids how to read. It brings me back to my entrepreneurship teaching, that in order for me to actually meet these kids at their academic need, their literacy needs, I had to first meet them at their dreams. So I would walk into libraries and I would say to the kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, the beginning was, hey, who wants to read? And everybody like, nobody, bye. And then I would say, okay. What do you want to be when you grow up? And then kids would say, I'm like, yeah, I know. It's a silly question. What do you want to be when you grow up? And the kid might say, I remember this one young lady said, I want to be a material engineer. I said, what? She said, a material engineer. I said, excuse me, miss. And she said, yes. I said, I can't even spell that. And she said, you can't? You got a doctorate. I'm like, hey now. But I can't spell that. What is a material engineer? She's like, well, material engineer, they take different parts of things and they put them together. I was like, so tell me the type of things that you create. And she said, well, there's a lady in church, and that lady gave me a sewing machine. I said, what? And what'd you do with that sewing machine? And she said, you know what I did? I got some old jeans. I cut them up. Then I got an old handbag. I cut that up and I made a new handbag. I said, did you really? She said, yes. I said, well, let me tell you something. I was like, I think I might have a book for you. And she said, a book for me? Who does stuff like that? I said, this is a lady named Carol Lowe. I said, you ever heard of her? She said, no, I haven't. I said, just wait right here. I'm going to go find that book for you. Walked over to the biography section in the Homewood Library, pulled out this book. I said, can we read it together? And she said, yeah, sure. We start reading it. And as we're reading this book, guess what happens? This young lady starts to see herself. Now, this lady, Carol Lowe, was like, she was around. She made the dress for Jackie Kennedy. So that's like 1950s, 1940s, something like that. But the young lady saw herself in this character. Fast forward, I'm in Target. This young lady says, Dr. Griffin-El. And I'm thinking that she's talking to my wife, because I've been like a stay-at-home dad for like 3 years at the time. I was like, babe, somebody talking to you. I got my youngest son. We're about to go get something to eat at Target's Pizza Hut. And the young lady says, Dr. Griffin-El, and I turned around and I said, oh my gosh. I said, I forgot your name, but I remember your dream. And she said, what was my dream? I said, you wanted to be a material engineer, and I still can't spell that. And she started laughing. She said, Mommy, this is the man I was telling you about. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And so we have a conversation. But I tell you that story to say this, that we got to meet kids at their dreams, not just at their academic needs. And I know that the school system isn't structured like that. You know, when I was a graduate student, I studied a Brazilian philosopher by the name of Paulo Freire. And he talked about the difference between education and schooling. Now, of course, he's Portuguese, so he didn't say schooling. He used the term the banking method of education. And the banking method of education essentially says, you know, the teacher is the savior who has this gift that they are going to bestow upon students. And that gift is the knowledge that they're supposed to learn in class, you know, whether it be math or reading or whatever the subject is. But he had a different view of education. He called it the problem-posing education. Now, what the problem-posing education said was, guess what? We have to look at education from the perspective of how do we solve problems in the world? And if we're solving problems, guess what students become? They don't just become these empty vessels that we dump information in. They become what he called co-investigators. Now, if you read anything about Freire, if it's not his own work, there were major critiques of him, especially during, I believe, the 80s and the 90s. Well, Freire, like, what is he trying to say? Does the teacher just give up their classroom and just let students do whatever they want? And Freire's position to this was, guess what? The student and the teacher have different responsibilities in the learning process. However, what they're supposed to do is use this thing called dialogue. Because when there's no dialogue in the classroom, when teachers and students aren't pursuing educational goals together, what happens is that students get information that they're supposed to regurgitate on tests versus being able to solve real world problems. He had another term. He said, we must read the world and then read the word, meaning that we got to make this relevant, you know? When things aren't relevant, people develop prototypes. They develop systems of thinking that have no practical reality. I'll give you an example. When I was in South Africa, there was this group who said they walked into a school and they said, kids don't have desks. We see kids writing on the ground. We must change this right now. So they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make a book bag that could transform into a desk. Amazing idea, right? And when the kids were in school, it worked. When they were at home, it worked. But guess where it didn't work? When the kids had to get on what they call taxis, but it's a different context of taxis. It's not taxis as in, you know, the yellow and black, you know, cars. It's like a van. So kids would get on a van that might be built for 10 people, maybe 20 people are in the van. The book bag didn't fit because it was so big. So kids began to leave the book bag at home. And when these people who created this innovation, when they came to the schools and didn't see the kids, they said, wait a minute, these kids don't want this. Oh, they don't want to learn. But when they found out, when they engaged in dialogue with the kids, guess what happened? They found out the kids got into trouble or had to wait until there was an empty taxi so they could get on the bus and go home. So they winded up leaving them at home. Innovation that is not embedded within reality won't meet the kids' needs, nor will it meet them at their dreams. Now, why do I say all of that? Well, our educational system is structured in that manner. Before COVID, teachers would teach, Parents would ask their child. I know I would do this every single day at the bus stop. Hey, boy, what you learned today? Dad! And, you kind of got to guess. And then, as time goes on, like if he's, that 3 hours before or a couple of hours before bedtime, he getting another nugget every hour or two. Like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden you see they had a test. You say, boy, you got a B plus. Why what the rest of these points at? Why you didn't get the A? But we didn't know what was going on, Even if they send us a bulletin, we're going to learn this, we're going to learn that, we're going to learn that. Like, okay, great, thumbs up. But we didn't know what they were learning. Then COVID happened. And COVID did what I called, it democratized education, especially for parents. So we now know what they're reading, how their teacher is preparing them for their exams, or how their teacher is preparing them for whatever state standardized test that they have to take. And as a parent, I'm realizing something, that my oldest son, was going through an educational experience that was similar to my own. Teacher stands up and they talk. But if you're going to meet my son at his needs, you got to know my son. So I know my son. I'll give you an example. My son is a kinesthetic learner, right? He like touching things when he ain't supposed to touch them. I mean, any parent know that. You be like, hey, don't touch. Okay. Sorry. So my son loves touching things that he ain't supposed to touch. And loves building things, more importantly. Give him a box of Legos, that boy build it. Give him some cardboard, he got a ramp and everything else. So he was struggling with math, and he was writing it down. I said, look, went downstairs, got some cardboard, cut it up, got some old laminated paper, cut that up, and designed like these three little bars that was similar to the bar graphs that they would be using when they're doing like that triangle math. Like it's like 1 + 3, and then you leave it blank. Like, what's the answer, right? And so I designed this for him, and he was able to get it. Now he's still in the process of getting it, but creating that tool, I was co-designing with the teacher, and I thought to myself, why can't education be like this in general? Why can't I, as a parent, give feedback? Why can't I, as a community member, give feedback to how kids are learning? So, when we talk about COVID and its impact on education and how it has democratized education, we can't go back. We can't open up schools once we get vaccines and primarily teach the way that we have always taught. We gotta see parents as co-designers, see students as co-designers, see community members as co-designers, because at the end of the day, we are a part of this larger family. So let me talk about what it means to be a community member. There's a book that I think captures the beginning of the book, captures what it means to be a community member as an African American. It's this book called Unspeakable by Carol Boston Weatherford. If you haven't, is this backwards? Can you all see it?
Yeah.
This is a awesome book. It's about Tulsa, Oklahoma, about Black Wall Street. And it gives you the important details about how Black Wall Street was a prolific place, had businesses, hospitals, and more importantly, well, not more importantly, but my focus, that it had schools. And Carol Boston Weatherford said that the school that was in this community was a high-performing school. And it made me think to myself, Here goes a community working together. Not just in business, not just in the healthcare industry, not just in having their own fire departments, public safety, but they were working together educationally. And it inspired me to say, why can't Pittsburgh public schools or public schools across the country be just like that? Why can't they see us as collaborators, co-designers? It brings me to going back to my library experience. I realized that if I sit up there and talk to a kid, which there was a young man, and I can share this article with you. I wrote about it as a reflection. It was a young man. I'm not going to say his real name, but I called him Malcolm in the article. Young man was left down twice, just like me. You know, when we sat down to read, he struggled. But he was willing to engage in this struggle to be a better reader because I met him at his dream. I learned about what he wanted to be. He said he wanted to be an architect. I said, you want to be a what? He said, an architect. I said, man, let me tell you about this dude. Now, it wasn't. I couldn't find an architect that was African American at the time, but I found an architect that when I heard about his work, I was extremely astonished. I said, there's this dude, this brother, built a house on a waterfall. He said, what? He said, what? I said, no, I'm telling right. That's what I said. I said, what? A waterfall. He said, what was his name? I said, Frank Lloyd Wright. You want me to get the book? He said, there's a book about him? I said, let's go to this biography. Let's get to this biography section, young man. So we sat down, we read it, and this young man was inspired. Every time I saw this young man in the library, he would get the Legos, he would get the magnetic blocks, he would get the Lincoln Logs, and we would sit down and have a conversation. But when I asked him about school, he said he hated school. He said, you know, they just put me in a corner somewhere. Why? Because they didn't see him. They didn't see him for who he was. They saw him for his standardized test score. Now, let me tell you, I had this teacher. Her name was Miss Simmons. Miss Simmons was an amazing teacher. I told you, I was a D- student. I'm giving myself a extra grade, a bump up, you know. I probably was an F+. So, Miss Simmons, later on, when I did my master's work, I realized that the way in which she was teaching me is how folks teach gifted students. She was asking me questions. She was engaging in dialogue with me. She was saying, you know, was helping me write articles for the school newspaper. She was giving me projects. Why was she doing that? Because she saw me for who I wanted to be. Not what my test score said, not who my test score said I was. Because my test score said I was free. My test score said I was below basic. You know, my socioeconomic status said what? I was free and reduced lunch. You know, that means working class or working poor. But she saw me as, Nosakhere, you said you wanted to be a journalist, right? So we're going to make you a journalist. We're going to do everything in our power to make you a journalist. But she saw me for my dream, right? And she supported me in gaining those skills. More importantly, gaining the confidence, the self-efficacy that would propel me throughout life. As a community member, I have engaged with so many children who go to public schools who haven't been engaged like that. When I graduated from University of Pitt with my Ph.D., my first job out was a job at a high school. Won't tell you where, but it was in the city. And man, whatever you do, don't my water keep on splashing on my face. So my bad. So my first job was in high school, and we had to teach. My colleagues and I, we had to teach students who were in lack of better words, juniors and seniors, African-American boys. And we had this preset curriculum. The curriculum, it was like a leadership curriculum. Curriculum wasn't working. Went back to my boss. I said, hey, we got to change this. And he said, all right, propose something. So I said, all right, first, before I even draw anything up, I think we need to go to the students and actually see what they want. He said, all right, write a survey. I'll approve it, or I'll give you feedback. And then once it's okay, then we'll go from there. So I wrote up a survey. He approved it. My colleagues and I, we get the surveys to the students. So we sat in class with them. I said, hey, here goes the survey. We're going to take all class, just fill it out. It's a 45-minute class. We see the survey balled up, thrown on the ground. They say, they were using some colorful language that I'm not going to use here because, I ain't going to disrespect nobody's eardrums. You know what I'm saying? And we were like, wait, I'm just like, come on, bro. I'm trying to help you out. How do we, what's up? And the guy was like, we ain't filling that out. So we did it again. They threw it on the trash. Balled it up, threw it on the floor. Sometimes they threw it in the trash. So I told my friend, I said, you know what we got to do? He said, what? I said, we got to pull them out one by one because they just acting out. So we pull them out one by one. And we ask them to read the question. Here goes juniors and seniors in high school who can't read. So we literally had to read the question to them and, fill it out for them. And it was a lasting impact on me. Because I'm like, these kids have been in this school system and they can't read. What are they going to do when they get out? So fast forward 10 years, I'm in the libraries and I'm seeing kids who can't read. So I'm thinking to myself, why aren't community members, people who are part of the black family, the fathers to the fatherless and the mothers to the motherless, how come we're not given the opportunity to actually co-create curriculum? Because if we were, and we were able to support teachers in understanding how do you redesign or innovate or iterate your pedagogical approach to speak to kids' dreams? Because I'm telling you, I'm a total stranger. And kids are like, I used to tell my wife, I'd be like, man, this little kid walked up to me as I was leaving to get on the bus and he said, can you read with me? And I was like, I can't because the next bus is like 90 minutes away. You know what I'm saying? So I got to get to my next library. But kids were always willing to read because they knew that I saw them for who they wanted to be and not who they were. I'm going to talk about it. Now I'm going to move from the community perspective to the student perspective. I was a student activist. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. I wrote articles about school security staff who were extremely abusive to students. And again, that's another topic that, I can speak for 3 hours on, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to end it there, My teacher, Miss Simmons, forced me to develop my voice. And that perspective of developing my voice and using my voice, it never left me. I remember one time I wrote an article and a teacher he was like, he called me a loudmouth, called me, you could imagine what a grown man who's in his 50s said to a 50-year-old. And I was discouraged. Miss Simmons said, did you say anything that you felt was wrong? I said, no, I was speaking about my experience in the school. She said, well, you got to keep on keeping on. So I feel like students need to be active participants in what they learn in school. They should constantly be asked to use their voice. I'll give you an example. My sons, if you ask them about what they're reading in class, they say it's boring, Now, what would they rather be reading? They'd rather be reading superhero books, books about monster trucks, books about race cars, cool things, right? And I think to myself, wait a minute. why couldn't schools actually implement some of these ideas? Why can't we have students reading things that they're interested in? Why can't the curriculum be like that? Now, some people might say, "Hey, they could do whatever they want to do in library." And my son's librarian, he's amazing. But I was like, wait a minute. When they're taking English language arts, they're reading things that are not interesting. What if we ask kids, what do you want to learn? What types of books would you like to read? And what if we started to order those books slowly but surely? Now, some people might say, hey, that will be a lot. But there's organizations out there whose sole purpose is to donate books. Their sole purpose is to donate books to educational institutions, specifically schools, so that kids could have books that they're interested in. So what if we partnered with people like that so that kids could actually read things that they like? I'm about to go into a whole lot. I got so many stories about that. But, if we are to change the way we do education, the people who are the direct participants in this process have to be engaged. And I'm not saying that we should only engage students who are gifted and talented honor roll students. We should be engaging the kids who are the ones who need support in the learning process too. Because when I was in the library, again, I would ask kids what they wanted to be. And some kids would say, I don't want to read nothing about that right now. I say, so what you want to read? They'll tell me a book. I'm like, all right, let's get this. They'll tell me a topic. I'm like, how about these books? Because, to my wife's dismay sometimes, we have invested a lot in Amazon. I feel like we bought so many books from Amazon, I deserve some stock. So the point I'm making is that we have invested in our children's interests, right? They say they want this. I'd rather buy them a book than a video game. And of course, they rather a video game than a book sometimes. So the point I'm making is that we need to talk to all kids about what they would like to learn in class. What if, I'll give you an example, even I have to listen to my own advice as a parent. Sometimes, I'm like, okay, boys, we're going to do our 20 minutes of reading. They're like, I don't want to do it now. I'm like, but we got to do this because you got to stay focused. But the times, I'll give you an example. This weekend, my son, I'm watching him play with cardboard. All of these abandoned Amazon cardboard boxes that I don't even know where they came from because I thought they was in the basement in the recycling bin, but that's neither here nor there. I'm watching my son put slabs together and roll his Hot Wheel trucks up them, or his Hot Wheel cars. Then he got monster trucks. So he's doing that. And so, I went upstairs, I got my glue gun, and I just glued the slabs of cardboard together. And he's like, Dad, you made a monster truck, crashing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no. I just did what you were doing. I just got the glue. He's like, oh. And so literally, these boys played on this thing for 3 hours. Nintendo Switch and everything on the TV, they ain't even touch it. They just playing with this thing for 3 hours. I thought to myself, I need to listen to my children more. I need to listen to their actions. Like, they played, and they still play on it. I mean, my oldest son, he got 2 Coke, Dr. Pepper boxes, put them on his arms. Got 2 more, put them on his legs. Put another big box over him. And he comes up and he says, look, I'm Iron Man. And I said, what? I said, no, you more like Dr. Pepper, moving to, moving box man. But yeah, you Iron Man. But he was using his creativity. He was inspired to be He was inspired to actually do his dream at that moment. And as a parent, I got to follow that. What if the educational process allowed us to follow where our students are? Going back to the Freirean notion. What if we were co-investigators with our children in the schools? If we did that, maybe children would love learning more. Paulo Freire also talked about this concept of hope versus fatalism, right? Fatalism is what? Life is predetermined. You walk into a school, it's predetermined what they're going to learn for the most part. Versus what he said, he talked about hope. Now, hope has a religious connotation for Paulo Freire, who was Catholic. But he was able to break it down in a very secular context. He said hope is this. Hope is the art of unfinishedness. Whoa. So if I am unfinished as an individual, meaning I can keep on growing and growing and growing, that means the world is unfinished. And if the world and myself is unfinished, that means school and learning should be unfinished too. Like I should never stop learning. When I got my Ph.D., the chancellor of the University of Pittsburgh, they put the hood on you. You walk across stage and you shake the chancellor's hand in front of everybody in the Peterson Event Center. And he shook my hand and said, "Congratulations, young man." I said, "Thank you very much. You have a terminal degree." And I said, "Wait a minute. Does that mean I die from learning?" He said, "Ha ha ha ha. I have to use that one, young man. But I see myself as constantly unfinished. Even though I got a Ph.D., even though I have a terminal degree, I'm not going to be terminal in my learning." But the way education is structured, guess what? It's terminal. Grade by grade. You learn this way and that's it. It's very fatalistic. Learn this way and that's it. It's not unfinished. What if the teachers would say, "Hey, let's build upon that cardboard monster truck stadium crash, blah, 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 that you just designed"? What if we did that? Would learning be a more enjoyable process? And we know what we enjoy, we go back to. If we hate it, I don't care if somebody said, "Hey, I got the cure to whatever." You're like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm gonna see how everybody else, how I work out for everybody else before I take that cure." But if we love it, if it's a trusting relationship, guess what we're going to say? I'm going to try it. Even if it's hard. When I was working with this young man, he struggled. This young man that I call Malcolm, he struggled with reading. But I said, "Look, man, I'm just going to give you this PowerPoint real quick. Now, some of these words in this PowerPoint that I broke down phonetically, we more than likely might not see it in this book, but we're going to work on it because we got to get this practice." He said, "All right." So he would break it down. And so when he would break it down, he would go through the pages. And with this one page, he read everything fluently. Not everything, but it was good. It was growth. And I said if anybody ever watched Seinfeld, I pulled the George Costanza moment, and this is what I would do with kids in general when I saw that they struggled with reading. When they read a page or a couple of sentences well, I would say, "All right, I got it." Now, if you ever remember the Seinfeld moment, George Costanza in Seinfeld, is an episode where he tells a joke and everybody laughs. And he said, "All right, I'm leaving," because he wants to leave on a high note. So that's what I would do with the kids. I'm like, they read a sentence well, a couple of sentences well, page. All right, I got the rest of this book. But wait, I want to read some more. I'm like, "All right, I'm going to let you read some more, but just let me get this for you because I just want to celebrate you for what you just did." And trust me, every time I did that, guess what happened? The kids would come back. Even though they know they were coming back to a struggle. They knew that they weren't a struggling reader, but they had the power, if they kept on working on it, to do it. I always think of myself, when I first played baseball, I was horrible. I didn't pick up baseball until I was 10 years old. Anybody know, whoever played baseball, you pick it up at 10. There's kids who was playing it since they was 2, And so I struggled. But from 10 to 18, I became a better player. I mean, my senior year in high school, I like to tell my wife, she'd laugh at me, but I like to tell my wife I'm the athlete in the family. I was an all-star. She's like, that was almost 20 years ago. Yeah, but if just all-star's all-star, right? You know what I'm saying? You can't take that away. But no, we joke, but I was a bad player. But I worked. And when I got to college, let me just back up, just go right back to when I was a high school student, a F plus, a D minus, whatever y'all want to give me. You know, I'm gonna give myself a D minus. You know, I begged my way into Lincoln University. That's where I went to undergrad at. And the guy said, "Man, I'm gonna give you a shot, but I can tell you now, your grades don't look good." I said, "Man, if you give me this chance, I'm telling you, I'm gonna make something of myself, man." He said, "Okay, I'm gonna give you a shot. I'm gonna give you a shot through a program called Act 101. Do y'all have Act 101 at La Roche? Or did
we did years ago?
Yes.
Technically, we don't, but we kind of have something similar with our Providence Institute.
Okay, so Act 101 was designed by a guy by the name of K. Leroy Irvis, who was a Pittsburgh native. Well, he wasn't a native, but he built his career there, a career in Pittsburgh. So anyway, got to college through this program and started to take those steps towards being a stronger student. But the energy that I dedicated to being a good, well, excuse me, not good, all-star second baseman, I dedicated those that same drive and determination to being a better student. But it was because it was something about the people who were in my space when I was playing baseball that made me love it so much. What if we created an educational system that did that for students? The last part I want to talk about is like what it means to be a parent as co-designer. It didn't splash up that time, so I'm getting better at drinking water. The determination. So when I was not even when I was, that's the wrong way to start. As a parent, one of the biggest things that I realized is that if I am going to really meet my children at their need, I got to constantly understand who they are. I got to speak life into them. So much of education is believing that you can do it. So much of being a parent, I'm gonna get what they say. I'm gonna get a little spiritual right here. Like, I believe everybody was placed on this earth to do something. I believe that every single person has a purpose. I say it's God-given purpose. Now, some people might say, hey, I don't believe in God. You got a purpose. Your purpose is, the universe has a purpose for you. But it is my goal as a parent to be the steward and the advocate of my child and to protect my child's heart so that they can pursue their purpose. I have met so many people, whether it be, when I was teaching in South Africa or whether it be when I was teaching in Pittsburgh or wherever. I've met so many people who needed a parent to advocate for them. When I say advocate, I'm just not saying, when the teachers say you get into a fight in school, your parent is like, well, what happened, which is, that's important too sometimes. But someone who's going to say, wait a minute. Why are y'all reading this in class? I'll give you an example. My son, from September to Christmas, read maybe 11 books. 37 characters in these books were white. Flat out. Might have been 41 characters. It was a couple of Native American characters and one black male who was literally on a page for a sentence. I said to myself, wait a minute, how is this, which is a part of the curriculum throughout the district, how is this district majority black and the books that they read are majority white? They lack any diversity, although that's a core pillar in the district and across the country now, right? But you could tell me that. You know, Martin Luther King had a beautiful saying. He said, you know, people will give you lip service, but are they giving you life service? So you give me lip service, you know, we need more black teachers, we need to diversify, but why aren't they reading, why aren't the characters in these books representative of the community? Now, I'm not saying they got to read all black stuff, but they need to read, they need to be reading books with black protagonist characters. Because I, as a father, constantly got to get books like The King of Kindergarten, you know? I mean, this is one of my favorite books. This book has this young boy going to school, but beyond him going to school, it shows him enjoying school. It shows, it just focuses on him. And when my youngest son, who's in kindergarten, he's like, hey, Daddy, I'm the king of the kindergarten too. I'm like, yes, you are, son. Because he sees himself, you know? There's, I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, I could pull books off the shelf. But we need books that represent black kids. And I found myself constantly advocating for that. Now, they call it windows and mirrors. You need books that are mirrors. So the character needs to look like them. And you also need window books. Kids need to see themselves in the future. One of my favorite book, another one of my favorite books is May Among the Stars. This is an amazing book that, I'll tell you something. This young lady, well, if you know the story of Mae Jemison, did I say it correctly? Jemison, yeah. She was inspired to be an astronaut. You know who inspired her? You're going to laugh at this. This is in another book you probably should read. It's called Little Leaders. I forgot what comes after the semicolon, but it's basically a selected biography of black women. The person who inspired her to be an astronaut, you're going to laugh at this. This is going to tell my age. Star Trek. The black woman who was on Star Trek inspired her, May, to want to be a astronaut. Now, this book is important because she's inspired to be an astronaut, but then when she goes to class, guess what she says to her teacher? I want to be an astronaut. And guess what her teacher says? Well, maybe you should be a nurse. And May goes home, and the book is beautiful because it shows like a grayish blue color on a page. And she said, and her mom said, what's wrong? She said, well, Miss Such and Such said I can't be an astronaut. I should be a nurse. And she said, wait, what do you want to be? And she said, well, I want to be an astronaut. She's like, if you believe it, you work for it, you can achieve it. As parents, we got to advocate for our children. We got to advocate for their calling. Because I used to tell people in South Africa, I met so many folks who had beautiful dreams that allow trauma, oppression, everything else to stop them from pursuing their dreams. And this might be my quote. I think it's mine. But I talk to so many people, it might not be mine. It might be somebody, it might be a meme that I read and didn't give correct citation for. You know, you get your Ph.D., you got to learn to cite everything. You can't just say I said it, because then people say you plagiarized. Like, oh no, what I meant to say was, Griffin-EL 2021 said this. Nah, I'm joking. But the quote is this: the world is a graveyard of lost and forgotten dreams. Hey, we might not have Mae Jameson if she would have just said, you know what? I'm going to listen to my teacher and just be a nurse, which is a great profession. Of course, nowadays with COVID, that is one of the amazing professions that we have, They're our heroes. But that wasn't what she wanted to be. That wasn't who God called her to be. That wasn't what her calling was. And as a parent, a school system should see me and other parents as co-designers. They should be asking us, what type of learner is your child? What's your child's dreams? How about I do this in class that will speak to your kids' interests? Would that work? Yeah, great. And not just when they're failing, And like I said before, COVID has democratized education, meaning it has opened it up, and we all are seeing what education is at this moment. And we can't go back, because a part of what we see education is what? Well, not what well, some people say the purpose of education is for kids to get for kids to learn the basics, or for you college students, for students to learn everything they need to learn so they can get a good job. Let me tell you something. I don't know what your news feed on Facebook is, but mine's is always showing me, how robots are taking jobs away from people, like literal robots, When I look on, when I look at the New York Times or whatever, I'm seeing robots taking our jobs away. So then it brings me to this question. If we are not preparing our children to lead the next wave of innovation, then what are we doing? And innovation to me doesn't necessarily mean that you have to create something technological. It might just be an idea. When I decided to create this nonprofit that focused on literacy, people laughed me out the box. When I was in South Africa talking about dreams, people would say, oh, yeah, dream. Oh, yeah, well, you can talk about dreams, Dr. Griffin. I'm going to talk about a reality. And I'm like, okay. But I have seen this work not just open up doors, because, doors open and close, whatever. But I have seen this work around dreams open up people's hearts, open up children's hearts. And beyond opening up the hearts of children, I just want to take you back. It is opening up our understanding of community, our understanding of family. Students, parents, community members, Black community members. We're a community in this world. When we work together, we can really change things. But if we only give lip service to these ideas, then guess what happens? We won't change anything. I see myself as the father to the fatherless, because that's what members of my community did for me. That's what my fellow students, classmates in high school, they were my family. And of course, my mother, my grandparents, brothers, uncles, aunts, they were my family. They were advocating for me. What if we open the possibility of co-designing public schools to be in the image of us as a family? What if? I would argue it would be transformative. It would be, of course, disruptive, because it would mean that we would have to get out of how we do things. And working with kids, man, you realize real quick you can't do things the way that you want. You gotta kind of figure out what's the sweet spot. But beyond all of that, it would lead to the creation of a new world. A new world where people would be able to develop and pursue their dreams. So I open the conversation up with that. What if we allow the Black family, families in general, to be co-designers of a public school system?
Thank you, Dr. Griffin-EL. Let's open up the floor for questions, comments.